What, this? This is a Metallica t-shirt I got from Target. Well, what about you? No, listen, I don't buy clothes like that. I see all these, these folks dressed in, where if I go out with a customer or something or some business event, everyone's got clothes that fit and like a shirt with a neck and shoulders. I'm not built like that, right? I'm like I like need a store that sells clothes for like a hard-boiled egg. That's what I need. That's pretty much what I'm like. Steve Weiner here from GetRubix.com, and today I'm going to introduce you to the Intune Tenant Device Migration V3. Officially, I'm going to take you through how it works. I already showed you the user experience, and the GitHub's going to be live today. So enjoy. Well, you don't think like a hard-boiled egg has to buy clothes? Okay, so if you hop on the repo today, you're going to see the Intune Migration V3 package. We have an updated README here. A bunch of things I want to show you, right? So just go ahead and download it. Everything's really in the Migrate V3 folder. We don't have the separate folders like last time. So I went ahead and downloaded this, and I want to take you through the pieces, and we're also going to look at how that looks in the endpoint. So to get started, let's start by looking at the biggest change of all, which is the JSON file. So if we take a look at the JSON file, we don't need to update that. Let's go away. So the JSON is the only file you're going to have to modify. So when different parts of the script, so for example, if we go to the PreMigrate script, right, you're going to see things like the client ID. Those are hard coded and now to come from the JSON. Source tenant client ID, setting source tenant client secret, right? Otherwise, we used to have to modify all these separate areas, right? Not super convenient. Same thing down here, right? When we go through and pull different values out. Even the local path, right? There are some that you'll notice are hard coded, so we still recommend using C program data Intune migration. But if for some reason you wanted to change that local path, you could do it here, and it replicates across the board. Now you'll notice there are some optional areas, right? So if we open up the README, which I'm going to do, actually, let me open up the markdown for that instead. Yeah, so in the README, we describe the different variables that are here, what they mean, where to get them from, and then we also talk about these optional variables. So in the situations where you are moving off a domain join or hybrid domain join machine, you can supply your domain credentials there to do it. But if you're not doing that, you leave them blank. Finally, the locations down here. So your user data locations, where we're going to back up data from, you can modify this here. You can take away, you can add, and of course it's just going to pull these in. So when we go down to doing the migration evaluation here, it's just pulling those locations in from the JSON file. So really clean. The other thing is we kept the idea of having the option to start this from the pre-migrate or the start migrate. Really what it comes down to is, do you want to migrate the user data or not? If you do, what you do is you can essentially make a duplicate of this package and run it from the pre-migrate script, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And if we're not migrating any data, we don't even have to do that. We could just run it from the start migrate, which is how the previous iterations handled things. So let's take a look at the process and how it flows. So you modify your JSON settings with your tenant specific details. And you'll notice we have a reg path down here too. I'm going to talk about that. Okay, so going through the pre-migrate script, if you do want to migrate user data, let's go through some of the changes. So you start by running pre-migrate. This would be its own package. We do check, you'll see a big thing now. We're going to check if we're running in 32 or 64-bit mode, because this will dictate the PowerShell process. So that will mess things up if we don't have that. So you're going to see that now in some of these. But anyway, we reference our settings. This is going to be a common theme to pull that data in. We configure our local path. We set our install flag so Intune knows that we installed the app. We authenticate to the client using the ID and secret as credentials. And then we proceed like last time. We get information about the user and the device. So the active username, we get the user SID, we get the current domain, the host name. One new thing we do is we generate a GUID, right? So the GUID is really important if we're going to migrate data with blob storage, because it's going to be a unique way to identify that data up in blob. So we generate that here. Then we take the serial number and we gather info from tenant A about the device, the Intune object, the autopilot object, the group tag. So, one thing here you'll notice is there's a lot more try catches, right? And it might seem excessive, but logging has been the biggest thing we learned through this whole thing. There are so many pieces that if something fails, it's very important that we know where it fails and how to rectify it. So we've added extensive logging to each piece here. So that's something you'll see throughout, right? Now, how we calculate the data migration, this is the same thing, right? We're looking at all the folders that you want to migrate, getting the size of each one, adding them to the total user profile side. And then what we do here is we actually perform the backup of data. So if we determine that we can migrate this locally, you'll see we'll go through. One thing we do is we specify the user and the temp location. This was a newer feature here, specifying this AED broker folder. I'll talk about this in a second after I show it on the device, but make sure we exclude this from a backup. Helps after the device has been migrated. We put everything in the temp location using robocopy, right? Or if we don't have the local space, we'll use blob storage. So we'll go ahead, we'll determine that we are going to use blob storage. We'll make sure new gets installed and the AZ storage module we need, right? And then we'll pretty much just do the same thing, right? One change here is when we do compress the data before sending it to blob storage, we are taking advantage of using a portable version of 7-zip. This seems to work a little bit better during when the machine's in runtime and someone's using it, as opposed to using the built-in compress feature in Windows. So we're using 7-zip for that. After we post to blob storage, again, you can see extensive error handling. We go through, and the variables that we're going to need later, if you recall, we used an XML file in the past for this. The things we need, like the GUID, the migrate method, the username, the Intune object, we're going to write these to the registry, right? It's a little cleaner. It's out of the way. It's not, we don't have to parse it back from a text file, and we know where it's going to be. And this is getting that reg path from our settings. We recommend doing HKLM, software Intune migration. So that's what's happening there. Let's take a look at an end user device that's gone through this process. Here we go. So this is something that I have run the PreMigrate on. So I'll show you right here in the company portal. You can see we've been busy here testing the V3. So this was installed, and what did this do? Well, let's go take a look. So the first thing I'm going to look at now is the registry. I go to local machine, software. You see I have an Intune migration key. These are all my values here. So that's the autopilot ID. The current domain is workgroup, so it means I'm Azure AD joined. I was able to get the group tag. This is our unique GUID. Should we have done blob storage? We have the Intune ID. Our migrate method is local. We have the username, and we have the user SID. So everything is stored here so we can pull it back later. This is also apparent in the log. So when I go to C, program data, gotta spell still, data Intune migration, I'm going to open PreMigrate. It's all right here. So we can see all the data that was gathered. We can see everything that was copied. You can see we found the directory to exclude. We excluded the app data local packages, Microsoft AED broker plugin. So why are we excluding this? So if you recall, an issue we used to have was after migration, you would still see the old Microsoft account sitting in the settings account work and school settings. It was almost like a dead record of an account. One area where that comes from is this in app data local. So if I were to go to the local app data folder here, just to show you, if we go to packages, you see this Microsoft AAD broker plugin. So we don't want to touch it here while the user is still in a session. So if we go look at the temp location where we're storing these things, and if I go to app data local, packages, same location, there is no Microsoft AAD broker. So we've successfully excluded that without disrupting it from the current user session. So that's been really helpful too. So this device is ready to go, and everything was pulled over successfully. So now let's say it's time to migrate, or you're not going to migrate user data. If we look at the new start migrate, we wanted to make this dynamic to tell which method we're taking. So really simple. All we're doing here, same thing like last time, we pull in all the package files. You still have to make your provisioning package. I've done about 2 videos on it, so if you need assistance there, feel free to take a look at those. So we pull everything in locally, and then what we do is we authenticate to the graph. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to see if PreMigrate ran, and we're simply going to check this by looking at the detection rule, right? So if we see that this PreMigrate exists, we know to go pull things from the registry. So we can say, okay, look, PreMigrate exists. Go get the Intune ID from the registry, right? Go get the autopilot ID from the registry, the migrate method, the GUID, right? We can pull all these out, if we need them. Else, if we haven't run PreMigrate yet, it doesn't matter. We can start from here. It'll then repeat the process of getting the serial to find the autopilot and Intune object and the group tag, right? It's going to pull all that out, which is really nice. We're going to set the migrate method to none, because if we're starting with start migrate, we're going to assume we're not migrating. So we're going to hard code that. Getting the active username, and then once we have these values, because we'll need them later on, we set them to the registry here. So either way, the point here is it doesn't matter. One way or another, we're going to get to the same place, whether you start with PreMigrate or start migrate. Moving forward, simple stuff we were doing last time, setting the required policy for allowing the Microsoft accounts, turning off the last sign-in user. One thing we do is we do a little migration prep and migration check here. So if it determines the migrate method was local because PreMigrate ran, it's just going to check and make sure it correctly staged those directories that we were talking about. So C users public temp, you could check to see if everything is there. Else, if it's in blob storage, it'll connect to blob storage and it'll go make sure that the GUID container was generated. This is a great opportunity for you to make the decision of what happens here. In my script, all we're doing now in the template is writing it out. Hey, user data will not be migrated. Blob storage is not ready. Local data not found. You can use this opportunity to either add an exit, throw an error, pause the process, send an alert at this point to an admin. So every organization is going to want to handle this differently, but we built the logic in so you can determine what actions are taken there. Still removing previous enrollments, still getting rid of previous enrollment tasks. We're leaving Azure AD. This was in previous versions, but just to call out if we don't know, we're actually checking if we are domain joined. So if that domain join equals yes, right, we then pull in the domain user and password credentials to force the computer to unjoin, right, from the domain. At that point, we set our post-migration tasks and we install the provisioning package. And in the last step, we pull in because we got these from the registry, the Intune and autopilot ID, and we delete these from tenant A before rebooting the device. Now let's take a look at a device that's been migrated. Okay, so this is a device that's fully gone through the process, right? Big thing here is if I go to this PC, users, we can see, so this is Han Solo, right? The problem we were having initially is we were getting a duplicate. So the PC was aware of the original profile. So even though we renamed the original to old underscore Han Solo, we would end up with Han Solo underscore some random character. This was a big issue everyone was having. And you know, I'll tell you, we couldn't really figure out where that was coming from. So we've excluded the AED broker, but that wasn't really the problem. It turned out we essentially did a search for all the places that profile existed in the registry. So during middle boot, right, when the device is out of tenant A but the user has not signed in yet, we scour the registry for these locations, which we get between the user and the user SID, and we just blast them away. Right, there's a whole bunch in the identity store and Windows NT profile list, and finally in the logon cache. So we get rid of those, and then we remove the old user directory. Right, so we're really cleaning this up here in middle boot to prevent that issue. And as you can see, we're not having that. We're also not having it here when I go to settings, accounts, access worker school. You see, we only have the Steve capacity one, not the tenant A one. So everything's nice and tidy here and cleaned up. So we no longer have that issue with everything. Okay, going back to some of the other tasks, right? We're still setting the primary user. I did a video recently on the best way to do this if you're also involved in migrating your identities. So definitely worth checking that out. But simply what we're doing here is we're finding the user SID, right? And we're getting the Azure AD object of that, and then we're going to match that up in Intune so that the primary user gets set. That really hasn't changed too much. Restoring the profile, right? It's very dynamic. So we pull from the registry, the migrate method, if it's local, copy everything over from the temp folder. If it's blob, we reconnect to blob, pull everything down, right? Invoke that, put it back, expand it, copy it over. And then, of course, we restart the Explorer and reboot the PC one more time. And we put the policy back. Nothing else really big changed here. Data comes over no problem. Our autopilot registration did have a few errors in it, even though it was working. It would throw an error, so that's been corrected. So the error handling has been improved here. Okay, and the last big thing is like I said, we've done a lot of work on the logging. So if I go ahead to this device, which has been migrated, you're going to see a lot more now. So each post-migrate task gets its own log. So if I were to look at the set primary user log, I'm just seeing what it pulls. It found the user, it pulled the object, and it was able to do this. Now we can see in this case exactly where I had an error. So setting as primary user on the device, I got a 400 error, so I had a bad request. So I know where to look for that, and I don't have to scour through that, right? Exception calling, CTR with one argument, string cannot be 0 length, right? So right here, I can see exactly where that errored out in the set primary user PS1 script. So every log for every task and script. Autopilot registration. I'm going to pull this, bring it down, and we can see here we have, this is all very specific to autopilot registration. The middle boot, this was the big one. So we can see all those registry items were removed. We found them, we call them, so we see that they were removed. Okay, and the directory itself. So everything is very easy now to troubleshoot because things do go wrong sometimes, but it's nice to have that. So hopefully this does make life easier. This took a lot of work to figure out, hashing most of the bugs out. Again, thank you to everyone in our Discord community. The feedback has been tremendously helpful in taking the first solution, making modifications to it, adding features that everyone requested. You know, and it's just been great to have the community response. The GitHub is now live, so feel free to go check the new version. The README should be pretty thorough, but if you do have questions about it, let me know in the Discord. In future upcoming videos, we are going to take a look at how to build specific pieces. We're not going to go through step by step because a lot of it's the same, but we might focus on some specific areas and how they work and how to troubleshoot them. If there's anything you'd like to see specifically covered, let us know in the Discord, and we'll make sure we film one of these about it. But enjoy using V3 and let us know what you think.
1, 2,